This is my third time reading Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. And yeah, I lived up to all of the memories. Yeah, I've read this quite a bit, and I plan to read it a lot more in the future, because this is just another one of those classic books, and I got some more from it from the reread. I read it a little, my mind was a little cleaner. I really thoroughly enjoyed this round, and it's hard to review something like this. It's hard to review something this great because it is great, and you look for things to say in your review, but you don't know what else to say because like everything to say has already been said. Like all the praise is just here. It's totally praised by a lot of people, but there's also a lot of people who just overlook this. In my opinion, this should be a book that's mandatory reading for all kids in school. If you want to be an author too, like this is a lot of thought into this, especially the world. The world is what struck me this time. He packs so much history into the world. The world feels lived in thousands of years, which it has, and it's I've never felt like that ever in a story before. Like, you can have some great magic systems, but sometimes the world just felt slapped there, made up by the author. This feels like a real world. It's almost just as much time working on the actual world than the story, which I can appreciate now. Before, I haven't really appreciated that. My main focus was on the story, but now looking back, seeing how he plans things, and now looking back for the show, because the show is going to be history. And that's crazy. So this has inspired me more than ever to read the Silmarillion, because you can see him talking about like Silmarils and stuff in here, which is crazy. As for the story, it was fantastic. It's the story I've always read. I was reading Lord of the Flies recently, and after that to Dark, it feels happy and like really mysterious and kind of scary and action-packed all in the same time. Like, it's crazy how he does that. It's just like such a great thing to have in Lord of the Rings. It's like Frodo, it feels high stakes, obviously, and the characters they're all good, I would say. I mean, it's not grimdark, obviously, very, very far from grimdark, but still you can see what the ring does to people, and the ring makes people not heroes, especially in their worst moments. Like Boromir and Bilbo had their moments, even though I would consider them good characters, especially Bilbo and Boromir as well. But like, the ring has its moments, which it's already setting the seeds of how long is it gonna be, how hard is it gonna be to let go of the ring, setting the seeds early on. And that's one of the strengths of a book series being written as one book, because Lord of the Rings was written as one book. I technically read it in this thing because it is one book, and I like to read it as one book. So I technically read it here. This is my reading copy, and obviously I have Fellowship of the Ring. I'm holding you that one. That was the first two times I read it. I read it in that one. And I'm holding you that just to show you it's Fellowship of the Ring, not Lord of the Rings, but I did read it in that one. And I obviously have this beautiful edition, which I got to look at the original illustrations, which was an awesome experience, just looking through these illustrations and seeing this happen. It was an awesome experience reading Lord of the Rings this time. And especially with all the books, I switched between audiobook a little bit so I can get the narration, which was beautiful. And looking through those pictures and reading the books, that was just a fantastic experience. So reading Lord of the Rings is an experience I would not want you to miss, especially because the characters are like, they're fine art. Especially like someone like Sam is very loyal, someone who I haven't seen in a while just be that loyal and selfless. I personally think Sam is one of the most selfless characters I've ever read, because of just how like he's a servant to its core, but he loves his master, and he would go like anywhere. And I think that's one of the first times it's been written. And Gandalf, obviously, just like a super cool old dude. Like, he's just a legend at this point. I'm getting into this Lord of the Rings lore. I'm obviously not an expert as most people, but I am starting to do my research, and I've always been a fan as long as I can remember, but now I am starting to kind of live in the world, because the world is almost just as fleshed out as the world we live in today, which is insane. It's crazy how much he thinks about this, which I applaud, because this is clearly thought out, and not just, oh, this is a book I need to like work out to make money. This is his life's work, it feels like. And it is, so it's just a really awesome thing to see. It really ends at a perfect point. I personally, there's two kind of parts in this, like the book 1 and book 2. I personally enjoyed the first one more because of the stuff with Tom Bombadil and just how mysterious that is in the Shire antics. Obviously, I'm not the I mean, a lot of people love the Shire. I love the Shire a lot, especially reading it. But I love them going out. I love this story of how Bilbo disappears. I love the original first chapter. It's just such a classic, especially after you read the Hobbit first chapter. It's so similar yet so different. I love it. And yeah, it's just kind of crazy how he just leaves and how he's ready for it. And it's how they find the elves is just something of legendary. And I personally think the Fellowship should have stayed together longer. I don't think it was enough, in my opinion. But Gandalf did some epic things. It's crazy to think like this old man could do that much, but he is very powerful. And I always underestimate Gandalf until he does something crazy, which I love to see because it makes me like enjoy the book. Personally, my two favorite characters are gonna have to be Legolas and Gimli. I love the antics between those two, because their races are enemies, and obviously Tolkien goes through a lot of time explaining why they're enemies because of the history. History is not a big thing brought up in any other fantasy series, but here, history is so important, and I love that. And their history is terrible, but like as you can see, they quickly become friends, and it's natural. Legolas and Gimli are two of my favorites. I've always been a Legolas fan for life. Like, I think I dressed up for him as Halloween when I was very young. Yeah, it's just, I've always been a fan. It's just this time I see him in a new light, see how beautiful and wondrous this writing is, and these characters are great. Gimli is just such an underrated character because the dwarves are just one of my favorite. Dwarves and elves are like my favorite races in Middle Earth, and I thought Aragorn was obviously such a strong character. Personally, I don't see a lot of his emotion, but I do see a lot of his heart, and I totally support him. I love Strider, Aragorn, whatever you want to call him, but he is obviously one of my favorite characters. The characters are so great here, and that's what's great about it, because I don't see a weakness here. The characters are great. The action is exciting that I'm glued, like I can't stop reading. And it's like the world is obviously fleshed out, which I've told you so many times, and there's really no weaknesses here. It's one of the most enjoyable books I've ever read, even though it's a classic. A lot of the classics are not enjoyable, which I discussed in my last video. You learn a lot, but this has just so much learning, so much stuff in the page. I wouldn't say learning, but like so much information, but also just like you love to learn. That's what's great about Lord of the Rings. I have never read a book like Lord of the Rings in that sense. It's just so well-rounded and so interesting. I really loved it. The lore is quite fantastic. I can't wait to start the Two Towers. And I recall this was my favorite. I don't know. I think it's either this one or Return of the King. I remember a lot of stuff that happened, but I'm sure I'm forgetting a lot. So I am super ready. J.R.R. Tolkien is one of my favorite authors. I do not know why I don't talk about him more. He just looks so talented, and I'm really, really excited to read the Unfinished Tales and the Silmarillion. And let's hope that the show is as good as the other movies, because the adaptations were fantastic. They personally is what got me into Lord of the Rings. And The Lord of the Rings is just such a fantastic series because of that. And yeah, these books are unexplainable good. It's hard to review. And you wouldn't hear that from me often. I don't say things are hard to review because it feels like if I insult it, it's like that I'm wrong. It's a little bit odd because I really can't find something that I would change about this, and that's just something great. So that's when you know you have something special in Lord of the Rings. So J.R.R. Tolkien, obviously 5 out of 5 stars. Again, blew me away for the third time. It captured me in the words when I was very young, like 6 or 7. Captured me a couple years ago, and then once again I'm here stuck reading Lord of the Rings, gushing about it. I remember I gushed about it a little over a year ago. It was my last reread, but I kind of rushed it. It wasn't really as like slow as I would like to, as like in depth. So, but I just kind of had it on my TBR, and right now I'm just kind of reading back. I'm just getting back into reading after a long slump, so I just took my time, even though I'm not really doing anything right now. So all I did was read it. So I had a blast. It was really fun. So, yep, obviously definitely read Lord of the Rings. What are you doing if you haven't read that? That's the one thing. This one is the one book on the channel where you have to read to get into fantasy. I'm not going to force you to read anything. My favorite book is Dune. I'm not going to force you to read it because I understand a lot of you won't like it. And I'm okay with that. It's just something like... But here with Lord of the Rings is you just need to. It's a cultural phenomenon because it's so well-rounded. There's so little imperfections. There's like... It's perfect, really, because it really gets you obsessed. And I've been obsessed recently, and that's a great thing in my opinion. So definitely go check it out if you haven't, and I'll see you guys in the next video. That was fun. I'm sorry, that was a little rave on Lord of the Rings, but you know I love Lord of the Rings. More content is to come, especially with Lord of the Rings and Umbrella Academy next, so you can expect some comic book content, some manga content coming up in the near future. So that's something to be excited about for you guys, and catch you guys later, and see you in the next one.